Hello there, my name is Hetty and I'm a violinist who is very happily playing with English touring opera during their London 2020 season, and we were playing Handel's Giulio Cesare and Mozart's Così fan tutte when the virus struck. And I have to say that ETO have been absolutely magnificent by paying their players, singers and staff in full and supporting us during this really difficult time. I never would have thought that instead of joining my colleagues in two of my favourite places, Truro Cathedral and Beverley Minster, to play Bach's John Passion, that instead I'd be sitting in splendid isolation talking to you about temperament. Well, what better time than now to get stuck into this vast and thorny subject. We're in very good company. It has occupied not just musicians, but theologians, mathematicians, natural philosophers and scientists since the time of the ancient Greeks. Pythagoras kicked off the discussion around 500 BC. And if I manage to spark your interest in the subject, what better time than to read what has to be one of my favourite book titles of all time, How Equal Temperament Ruined Harmony and Why You Should Care. It's a book by Ross Duffin, and it is a whole book on the subject of temperament, which I'm going to try and explain in its basics in 5 minutes. So, what is temperament? Well, it is the organisation and tuning of our musical scale for fixed pitched instruments such as the harpsichord and the organ, or instruments that have frets and therefore their pitches are fixed, like the lute and the theorbo. Here is our scale: do to do, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. That's 8 notes that make up an octave, and when you get to the octave, 8 notes higher, you start the whole pattern again. And the smallest interval is a semitone. Do, excuse me, do, di, re, mi, fa, fi, sol, si, la, li, ti, do. So we've got 12 semitones in an octave. Now, to understand the problem and why we have to temper these intervals to fit into an octave, we need to go back to the fundamentals of the harmonic series. Let's take a string or a column of air, as in an organ pipe, or a harpsichord string or a violin string, and divide it into half, and you generate the octave. So a string half the length of another string at the same tension will give you an octave higher, and you get a nice proportion of 1 to 2. So 2 halves fit into one, nice proportion. You can generate all the other intervals of our scale with these nice whole number proportions. So a fifth is the proportion 3 to 2, and a fourth is 4 to 3, and so on, down to the smallest interval, our semitone, which is about 16 to 15 in proportion terms. You can see why the ancient Greeks liked it, because we're talking in whole number ratios. If you pile our fifths one after the other on top of each other, you would expect eventually to come back to the number that you started with, to the note that you started with. But you don't. And this is the problem. You overshoot by a small amount, which is called a comma. And that comma is only about a quarter of a semitone, but it's totally audible to the ear, to the untrained ear just as well. It's just an uncomfortable amount of pitch that messes everything up. And that is what temperament is. It's the process of dealing with that pesky overshoot. Now, the notes of the harmonic series are exactly the notes that would be available to a natural trumpet, for instance, without valves. They play using the harmonic series within their length of tubing. But a keyboard has to organise its tones and semitones. So equal temperament is the modern way of dealing with that, and it shrinks the semitones. Remember, we overshot in the first place. So it shrinks the semitones by an equal amount, and that sounds like a perfectly reasonable solution, but it has a cost. And the cost is that apart from the octave, which is a pure interval, and everybody agrees of what sounds in tune, it resonates with itself, it feels pleasing, all the other intervals are out of tune, and they get increasingly out of tune from the fifth, which is a bit out of tune, the fourth a little bit more, and by the time of the third, you're really quite a long way from the purity of a pure harmonic relationship. So your chords don't sound as good. Now, in the medieval music was based on fourths and fifths, and musicians not only used these intervals, they also considered that they represented God's perfection of his construction of the universe. So harmony represented the beauty of God's creation, and therefore it was central to the way the music operated. By the Baroque period, music had entered the realm of harmonic progression, and composers were exploring keys, every key that was available to them. But the music hadn't become fully chromatic as it does in the 20th century, which is when equal temperament comes in, and that's a solution that fits chromatic music. So in Handel and Bach's time, the aim was to find a temperament that balanced good, pure-sounding chords with the availability of different keys. It's a huge subject with many solutions and gives rise to a wonderful list of names, all ingenious ways of organising the scale. We've got at the mean tone end of the scale, where you have good chords but not so many keys, the Pythagorean tuning, standard Aaron quarter comma. The quarter comma is that pesky overshoot, if you remember, divided into a quarter. And then you have the circulating temperaments, where you get more keys and but fewer pure chords. We've got Neidhart, Kellner's Bach, Kirnberger 3, Velotti, Young, Werkmeister 1 to 3, Rousseau 1 to 4, and those are all on my phone. I can dial them up and use them to tune my harpsichord if I want to. And here maybe is a good time to thank all our tuners and for you to appreciate the work that they do in the background, preparing our organs and our harpsichords for performance. They understand and can give us all of these temperaments, and it's an amazing skill. So thank the tuners. And that brings me to Bach. Bach was undoubtedly the greatest keyboard player of all time, let's face it. He was an amazing organist, and as such he was very well known in his time for regulating organs. He'd visit all the organs in the area of Germany that he worked and set them up to their best, and he was very interested and clearly knew everything about temperament. And he wrote a cycle of pieces, the Well-Tempered Clavier, which was a set of 48 preludes and fugues which cover all the keys in major and minor, and he had to have a temperament that could balance using all these keys with a good sounding. I think it's no question that he would not have approved of the equal temperament solution, where all keys become equal and they have no particular character. So he had the well-tempered clavier means he could use all keys available, and there was an amazing discovery that was made, well, certainly in the time I've been playing, about 15 years ago, when this little doodle at the top of the front page of the well-tempered clavier was discovered to be a schematic picture of the temperament that he used. If you read it from right to left, he has a little C down here which shows his starting note for the temperament, and these squirrels show which intervals he's tuning. I can't say I understand it myself, but it's absolutely fascinating that he produced that, and that secret has been unlocked, certainly in my time of playing. So there you have it. To find out more about how ETO is supporting artists and keeping music in all our lives during the COVID-19 pandemic, and how you can support those commitments, please visit englishtouringopera.org.uk. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.